some decades ago, when years that I was in Yeshiva, the neighborhood where the Yeshiva was going through a transition. And there had been Chafetz Chaim, when he picked up a pen and it didn't write, didn't work, he used inkwells in those years, so sometimes he would say it's an indication he should not write the letter. Other times he would say it's the Satan is interfering because I should write the letter. I'll go with the second shot. So the neighborhood was going through a transition. There had been a Jewish catering establishment. But there was no longer a Jewish clientele. So the owner rented it out New Year's Eve to the new population that had moved in, a non-Jewish population. A friend of mine that we learned in Yeshiva together, he had a part-time job for a time at that catering establishment, and now New Year's Eve, the proprietor had asked my friend Nochem to shut the lights in the upstairs there were two halls, one on the 4th or 5th floor, the other one at entrance level. The elevator was broken. The owner was not about to invest in fixing it, and Nochem had to be in both places exactly at 12 to shut the lights so everybody could scream Happy New Year. Impossible. Couldn't be done under normal circumstances without people there, let alone with the crowds and where the lights were placed, deep inside the cloakroom, inside the kitchen. It was impossible. It would take him, he figured, 10 minutes, between 10 and 12 minutes, to make it from one place to the other. So he came to me and asked me, what am I going to do? I have to be in both places exactly at 12 to shut the lights. So I told him, Nochem, listen. He wasn't about to subcontract one of the halls because he was making, I think, 35 cents an hour, and even then it wasn't being overpaid. so he wasn't going to split his take. I thought what you do is, the beginning of the evening, go up to the upstairs hall and move the clock 5 minutes back. Every hour on the hour, move it 5 minutes back. They're dancing, singing, drinking, with all the frivolity and indulging. They won't even notice what you're doing. That's what happened. It was exactly 12 o'clock downstairs. By the time you made it up to the upstairs hall, it was also 12 o'clock. It worked like a charm, and everybody seemed happy. Nachum came to me afterwards and he said, yeah, but I duped these people. They're living with the illusion that they ushered in 1951 at the right moment. I remember it was 1951 because later that year was when the illustrious home run of Bobby Thompson, right, off Ralph Branca. It was a historic year. So I told him, Nachum, it depends. Is time a reality, a creation of a creator, and therefore you must be in rhythm and step to that reality in order to maximize your potential? Or is it a fiction of the imagination? If it's a fiction of your imagination, what difference does it make? 1950, 1951, what's the difference? Just the state of mind. If it's a reality, then when you're approaching the border from Erev Shabbos to Shabbos, or from Erev Yontif to Yontif, you're crossing into a new jurisdictional zone. You're crossing into a new reality. If there's a Beirei that created us in relation to these time zones to maximize the potential of those zones and our potential. Such is our view. It's all the difference in the world. Lahavdil. We come to a Rosh HaShana, as the Derech Hashem says, we're not remembering what was once, Brias HaOlam, which means Brias HaOdam, the creation of man, corresponds to the sixth day of creation. That was the Rosh Hashanah we are talking about, the creation of man. Then it's a different. That's when man was set in place to fulfill his potential, his reality. Classical question that's asked is, if you were designing the calendar, what would you put first, Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah? It would seem reasonable to go for atonement first and then have the judgment. See how well you did with the atonement. We have it the other way around. Rosh Hashanah first, and then Yom Kippur. Some understand it that it corresponds to Brias HaOlam, the creation of man. Creation of the world. What is the world? Man. Man to utilize all of the resources that are put for him into place to use to connect to his Creator. Bringing those resources to their ultimate fulfillment. That's what they are there for. Man is created, Bereshis Bo Elokim, Midas Hadin, stringent judgment. Only then it's modified with V'yom Asos Hashem Elokim, Midas HaRachamim. Ideally, being here means that we've been given an advance and we're asked to redress the deficit. Instead of living in a welfare state on the dole from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we're asked to see if we can catch up on the deficit. Nahama de kisufa, bread of shame. Nahama, lechem, de kisufa of busha. Welfare. Biggest tzedakah, the Rambam says, is to be able to help the oni earn his own keep, because then he has self-esteem as well. The greatest self-esteem for man would be to reduce the Nama de Kisufa. That would mean Midas Hadin, earn our keep, spiritually earn our keep. That's what we're put here for. But we wouldn't be making it. Chazal teach us that the Rebbeinu Shalom began that way and then modified it. The Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't change his mind. The Rebbeinu Shalom knew at the outset what would be. But that remains as a lechatchila, as an ideal to reach for, to maximize as much as we can in the Bria, in creation, and in our mission statement, our goal. As much as possible. Are we going to have to fall back on the overdraft of Rachamim? Yes, of course. Inevitable. But it remains as something to stretch and reach for. And each Rosh HaShana, we're revisiting that moment when the ideal was put into place. Bereshis Bo Elokim. So therefore Rosh Hashanah, the moment of being Mamlech HaKadosh Baruch Hu, owning up to the fact that Hashem doesn't need me to coronate him, doesn't need a tzibur to coronate him, doesn't need a nation to coronate, doesn't need. There's no such thing as need when we're talking about the Rebbeinu Shalom. But the Rebbeinu Shalom has created his world in such a manner that in his infinite wisdom, this is the ideal good for us. This is the preferred reality for us to make it on Midas Hadid. There's another perspective that we could have on it. Any discussion that takes place depends on who the participants are. Who are the discussants? You speak one way to a child, another way to an adult. One way to a close friend. Speak shorthand. You start in the middle of the conversation. You use different language. You use a different vocabulary when you're speaking to one person or to another. Loshen Kodesh maximizes that. There's a difference in how you speak to a male or how you speak to a female, to a tzibur or to a not to a tzibur. There's a grammatic reflection in this ideal language of how to communicate depending on who are the discussants. So now if I'm entering into a dialogue with the Rebbeinu Shalom, I'm going to ask for atonement. What is more reasonable, what is more necessary than putting into place the ratio, the proportions of the two discussants? A creature created by his creator now petitioning his Creator. That's a moment that requires putting it into proportion. That's the moment of coronation, as it were, me being Mamlech HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So before, as an introduction to asking for atonement, I must establish who are the discussants. This human created by his Creator, who's been given the opportunity to put forth his case. That's Rosh Hashanah. That's the moment of being Mamlech HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Then, having achieved that, I enter into a relationship. Dilshu Hashem Behimotzai, the first of the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, Rosh Hashanah. I enter into that relationship, which allows me this extraordinary privilege of asking for atonement. Meshech Chochmah in Parshas Bolok talks about the Seder of the Psukim that we quote. We quote Psukim from the Torah, Psukim from Nevi'im, and Psukim from Ksuvim, that they precede the Tekiyas, the sounding of the shofar. Those psukim from the Torah, as they appear in the Gemara, and the Ran talks about it, Meshech Chochmah brings the Ran, that they're not listed in the Gemara as they appear in Chumash. The first pasuk is Usvuas Melech Boi in Parshas Bolok. Second pasuk is Vayhi B'Shurin Melech is in Sefer Dvorim. And the third pasuk is Hashem Yimloch Le'olam V'ed, which is in Shmos. In fact, in our Machzor, that we have it the way, the Seder of how it appears in the Chumash. Hashem Yimloch Le'olam V'ed, Vehi Usuras Melech Boy, and Vehi B'Shurin Melech, according to how they appear in Chumash. But the Gemara does not list them that way. And the Ran quotes a Gaon that says the Gemara wasn't makbid, it was lav dafka. But Meir Simcha says there is a Seder in how the Gemara lists it. The Seder is Hashem Melech, Hoveh, present tense. Hashem Moloch, past tense. Hashem Yimloch Le'olam V'ed, future tense. The first pasuk, Uschuas Melech Boi, present tense. Vayhi B'Shurin Melech, past tense, Ova, reference to Moshe Rabbeinu. Hashem Yimloch Le'olam V'ed, Sefer Shmos, but that's future tense. Explains Reb Meir Simcha that from the human perspective, the way the Rebbeinu Shalom created us, we accumulate our information and interact with the world through our senses. Sight, hearing, smell, touch, the way. That's how we interact with the world. That is most reasonably, usually impactful for us is the present tense. For man, that is his interaction with the world. Then he processes it through his brain, intellectually, sorts it out, absorbs, rejects. But his first encounter is through his senses. That's what present tense. The Orvar, the past, once was present. So there's been an erosion as time does its thing. But it once partook of present tense. That's Moloch, Hashem Moloch. That's Vayehi B'Shur and Melech. So Usuras Melech Bo is present tense. Vayehi B'Shur and Melech past tense. Hashem Yimloch Le'elam V'ed future tense. That's a projection. That's an extrapolation. That's based on how I digested and incorporated and processed the information. I'm making an imaginative estimation of what the future is likely to be like. So that is why, and Rameir Simcha points out that Yom Kippur as well, you're going to find a reflection of that from Anshe Knesset HaGedolah. Anechi moche psha'echo lemani. Hove. Anechi moche. The Rebbeinu Shalom is going to erase the guilt. Mechisi ka'ov. I whisked it away like a cloud. Past tense. Again, perspective of man. Hove, Ova, Osid, Hashem Melech, Hashem Moloch, Hashem Yimloch Le'olam V'ed. But there are other perspectives for the Torah Jew. There's the Rebbeinu Shalom, who is viewing, created, monitors, gauges all of the activity here. The Rebbeinu Shalom, there's no difference. Past, future, or present. But I'm trying to describe how I understand the Novi, his understanding of the Rebbeinu Shalom's perception. So I'll always give priority to past or future. The present is constantly evaporating, disappearing. Again, for the Rebbeinu Shalom, it's all simultaneous. The Rebbeinu Shalom created us in a world that we experience. Our empirical interaction with the universe is in a linear fashion. Past, present, future. We're at the present now. Yesterday isn't here. Tomorrow, projection. But for the Rebbeinu Shalom, it's all simultaneous. But when I am describing the Rebbeinu Shalom's perception, my approximation as close as I can come, I'm always going to give priority to Ova or Osid, because they go back infinitely. The Rebbeinu Shalom, as he teaches us in Torah, Kaviochel, teaches us and says that I don't change. I was the same Lo Shenisi before I created the world, after I created the world. Because the Rebbeinu Shalom, by definition, transcends time and space, and we are functions of his Ratzon, his will to create. Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, that name of the Rebbeinu Shalom, is understood to mean he is the only necessary reality. Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. That means he is the exclusive essence of independence. Everything else is dependent on his hashgacha and how he acts with us at any given moment. So, from the Rebbeinu Shalom's point of view, and from man's point of view, the Meshech Chochmah then lists some psukim in Yeshaya. When the Rebbeinu Shalom gives the Navi, the Nevuah, to speak, Kayomah Hashem Melech Yisrael v'Golo, Hashem Tzvokos, Rebbeinu Shalom talking now. Rebbeinu Shalom communicating. In that mode, what should we have? Past or future given precedence, and then present, last, correct? What does the pasuk say? Ani Rishon, I was here before anything else. V'ani Achron, and I will be here after everything has ceased. Umi balodoi, and other than me, ein Elokim now, hover, present tense. So the Seder is past, future, present, because you're talking from the perception of the Rebbeinu Shalom. When you're talking from the perception of man, Shema Elai Yaakov Yisrael Mikol Ra'ai, I have summoned you to be my witnesses. Which means that you now have to communicate and project this. So I'm talking to Yaakov to represent the position. So Yaakov's representing of the position has to be processed through human psychology, the dynamic of the human personality absorbing the information. So what should I expect first? Present tense. What does the pasuk say? Ani hu, I, present tense, human perspective. Ani rishon, past, I was, here belong before the world. V'ani achron, and I'll be the last, beyond the existence of this transitory, ephemeral, material universe. So, from the human perspective, perfect coordination. Also, Mem Gimel. Pasuk says, Atem Eidai, you are my witnesses. Again, we're the invite from man to represent the position. Num Hashem, va'avdi asher b'chalti, l'man teidu v'taminu li v'savinu, ki ani hu, present tense, l'fonai lo notza kel, v'achalai lo yir. Fascinating how perfectly it works. There's another perception, the perception of the Malochim. Perception of the Malochim, the difference between a Malach and a human being is that a Malach doesn't forget. He also doesn't know the future, but he doesn't forget. That's why Rav Meir Simcha says, Chazal teach us, that had the Jews not made the ego, they were angelic-like. They had reached the state, there wouldn't have been any shikha, no forgetting. A human being forgets because the material world acts upon him, and there's a rusting, decays the memory. It's not as urgent as present. A malach doesn't have that problem. Chazal say that the Rebbeinu Shalom, his insignia, his emblem is emes, the word emes. Because emes means something which is absolutely true, doesn't suffer any kind of qualifications. That's emes. That's why in halacha, a stream that every once in a while that stream stops flowing is called a stream that falsifies. It doesn't have continuity. It doesn't partake of foreverness, represent continuity. Psukim say that the word, the Mefoshim, the Yerushalmi says, that the word emes corresponds to past, present, and future. Aleph is the beginning of the Aleph base. Mem is the middle. Tov is the end. It's the future. The word emes then symbolizes the tenses. Past, present, and future. Rish Lakish brings a pasuk. He says this in the Yerushalmi. Ani Rishon, I am the first. The Rebbeinu Shalom consults with the Bezdin Shel Mala. Does he have to consult? Obviously not. But for some reason, that is the facilitator for bringing down the Hanhoga to the world of man, is the bringing it down through this consultation. And it's also instructive that we who need to take consultation should take consultation. Hashem doesn't need the consultation, but he goes through this exercise, kavayochel, as it were. So the psukim that reflect this correspond to the word emes. Ani Hashem Rishon. The second pasuk, U'baladai ein Elokim, other than me there is no. V'sa'achronim Anihu, I'm the last. Says that's from the point of view of the Malachim. Ani Rishon, giving precedence to Ova. Because Ova is longer than the present, and there's no forgetting for the Malach. We're talking from the perception of the Malachim. U'baladai ein Elokim, that is present. V'esa'achronim, the future, that's last. Because the Malachim also don't know the future. So they are upgraded over man, that there is no difference between Ova and Hove, but we will articulate the Ova first, because that's longer and isn't constantly disappearing. And the word emes is embedded there. The es achronim, the aleph of the es. Umibaladoi, the mem from mibaladoi. There's achronim ani hu, the tof from the es. The word emes is there. It's a stunning piece. If you tend to be a rational person, so you'll posit that Reb Meir Simcha had Ruach HaKodesh when he wrote this. If you tend to have blind faith in other theses, then you might look for how else he might have come across this emes. And then he ends with the Bereshis Rabbah. Bereshis Rabbah says that at the moment of creation, Bereshis Rabbah, Bereshis Bor Elokim, was the moment where emes was declared, put into place. The first three words of Bereshis Bor Elokim, the last letters, Bereshis, Tov. What is Tov? Which tense? Future. Bora. What's the last letter? Aleph. Past. So what am I giving precedence to? Future and past. Whose perspective is that? The Rebbeinu Shalom. So what's last? Elokim, Mem, Emes. So the word Emes is there, but it's how? It's from the Rebbeinu Shalom's perspective. Why? Because even the Malachim didn't exist at that moment of creation. Only the Rebbeinu Shalom's perception of the universe. Having seen this, I set out looking for where else would we find a reflection. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. I submit that it follows this pattern. The Chidor says it's Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shemayim, the accepting of the yoke of the Rebbeinu Shalom. So say Hashem Echad. No extra words. No such thing as casual or accidental diction or syntax. It was the Rebbeinu Shalom is teaching us something. Says the Chidor, when we, each one of us, recites the word Shema Yisrael, we should perceive ourselves as if we are addressing Klal Yisrael. We are speaking to Klal Yisrael. Okay. Let's go further. Why? What am I saying? Hashem, the Rebbeinu Shalom of mercy, the only. Why is that identical with the only other independence, Yud Kei Vav Kei? Why is that identical with Rachamim? Because he didn't need to create. He created as a function of his will, his decision to express Rachamim, Chesed. So they are identical, Yud Kei Vav Kei. But sometimes the world is Elokim. The world is Midas Hadin. That remains that Rosh, as we said earlier at the beginning. That impact of the Bereshis Bor Elokim. That's why Rosh HaShana precedes Yom Kippur, we said. There was such a position. And that remains in the Bria. So let's go now. The achdus of the Rebbeinu Shalom, the oneness of the Rebbeinu Shalom, is something I'm being asked, enjoined, required to declare. So, for most people, most of the time, their interaction with Klal Yisrael, and they're feeling a sense of oneness, unity, that transcends the diversity. We're different people, different bodies, different mindsets. But it's something, how many secular Jews, not yet enrolled in Osamer? How many out there have a sense of allegiance to Klal Yisrael? It's something they feel. Is there a rationale for it, an explanation? Very hard to defend. very difficult for them to explain in purely philosophic terms. But it's a metzias, it's a reality in the world, that people feel their interaction with a tzibur, with others, before they feel the oneness of the Rebbeinu Shalom. They still are loyal to Klal Yisrael, however warped might be their interpretation of how to express that. So Shema Yisrael, like the Chidah, is something what? I feel before the oneness that transcends the diversity on the ground. That's something I feel before I can express it. Why? I can justify, I can rationalize it. That's present tense. Shema Yisrael. Hashem Elokeinu. In history, ultimately even that which was Elokeinu, we know is for good. But we don't always experience it immediately as such. There are Churban Bayis Rishon, Churban Bayis Sheni, v'chulu, the Shoah, in our time. That's something that swings like a pendulum. Sometimes Rachamim, sometimes Midas Hadin. That's what? That's history. What will be the state of affairs by Bias Hagel when the Rebbeinu Shalom is Merachem, Be'ito Achishena, and its outermost date, hopefully sooner. But when Mashiach comes, it'll be nisbara, it'll become clarified that that which I thought was Midas Hadin was Chesed. So, again, what's the paradigm? The mode, the model? Shema Yisrael. That's something, that's my handle to grab onto. You sense and feel the unity that overtakes the seeming, the apparent diversity. There's a unity, there's a oneness there. Klal Yisrael, all over the world, all connected. There's so much more to talk about that, but now's not the time. So that's present tense. Hashem Elokeinu. Suffering. Hashem Chesed. Elokeinu Din. It swings up and back in history. Take that as a unit. Hashem Elokeinu. Do I know through Torah and my Amunah B'tochen that's ultimately for the good? Of course. But I don't see it and feel it yet. The oval standing by the graveside of his father, Lo Aleinu, has to say Baruch Dayan Emes, and he also has to be thankful for the Yerusha that he got. He has to express the Avelis. He has to go through Shiva, Lo Aleinu, and Avelis. But he's got to come back to reality. You didn't earn it. You didn't have ownership on whatever you got. It was given to you. But the Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't ask of us to deny the emotions. Yes, there's a context. Don't be excessive in your mourning to lose your grip on reality. The Putna used to be fond of quoting those who said that the word Ovel is an acronym for Ich bleib leben, I'm still alive. And you have responsibilities. And part of the responsibility is to attain to a mode of simcha to make you functional in your interaction with your chiyuvim and the people you have to deal with. Okay, finally, Hashem Echad. It'll turn out that this was for the ultimate good that it's a gloi milsa lemafreya, but that'll only be lost at Lavoy. Today I have to be honest. I see it, Hashem Elokeinu. I don't understand. I don't have a teretz to Moshe Rabbeinu's kasha of tzaddik v'raloi. I don't have a teretz to a lot of kashas. But I have a lot more terutzim to a lot more of the kashas that I know that my adversaries don't have terutzim to, and don't even have an approach to how to deal with it. Shem Yitain that we should continue the moments of Kiddush Hashem, of our digging in depth to the koyach of Torah, to transcend even what seemed to be the moments of frustration, of disorientation, of suffering, and to reach beyond that in our tefillos, in our learning, that this should be a year of ksiva, chsimatera, and psiris tevus for all of Am Yisrael.